you'd always kind of battle for budget to hire more engineers because that was the bottleneck. And that's changed, right? But what that means is that the bottleneck just moved, and it moved from writing code to actually telling the AI agents what to do. And I'm not saying that part is easy. That's actually the hardest part of building, and it's always been. But figuring out what to build is the most important thing these days.
When building software becomes easy, building the right software becomes even more critical. Welcome to the Thinking Straight podcast. I'm your host, Jason Griffin, an AI product leader and enthusiast here to help builders and entrepreneurs thrive in the AI transformation. On this episode, I'm joined by Nico Acosta, a former decade-long product leader at Twilio and the co-founder of BrainGrid, a product planning tool that helps developers and non-technical founders structure, plan, and manage work delivered by coding agents like Cursor and Claude Code. Our conversation covers why agentic coding tools haven't removed the bottleneck to building great software. They've just shifted it, and why that distinction matters, why it is more critical now than ever to focus on delivering customer value, the growing importance of developing thoughtful acceptance criteria in the age of agentic coding, a vision of the future where entire teams of AI agents collaborate to serve specific customer profiles, and best practices for using AI to sharpen your vision and clarify your thinking. Nico also provides us with a comprehensive walkthrough of BrainGrid and the workflows and tools that they're developing to unlock a whole new class of product builders. Whether you're a non-technical founder, a product leader, or a developer looking for streamlined ways to refine your ideas and delegate work to coding agents, this episode is for you. Let's dive in. Hey, Nico, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Excited
happy to have you. So I was thinking about, this conversation and where we could start. And the thing that kept coming to mind for me is I've heard you make the comment that you think that generating code with AI is at this point largely a solved problem, which is a big statement, right? And if that is true, what does that imply? What do you think is the biggest takeaway that product builders and entrepreneurs should infer from that statement?
Yeah. When you take a step back and you think, where were we a year ago, right? It's not that long, right? We were out of completing lines of code, right? It was like when Cursor Tab first came out, where Copilot was around. Kind of our unit of AI thing was, I'll complete the line, I'll complete the function, right? And this was mostly a tool for developers. It was a productivity tool, right?
Yep.
With Claude Code, with the latest Opus models, we've gone and kind of built entire features, right? And when I say that coding is solved, the actual process of writing the code, right? And you see this trend of like IDEs and all the tooling moving away from the code, right? Being less code-centric, less like you actually don't see the files anymore a lot of times, right? But what that ultimately does is that it moves the bottleneck. We were always bottlenecked on writing code. And in the world, kind of a year ago, there were, give or take, 50 million developers who'd write code, right? And that was the bottleneck. In big companies, you'd always kind of battle for budget to hire more engineers because that was the bottleneck. And that's changed, right? But what that means is that the bottleneck just moved, and it moved from writing code to actually telling the AI agents what to do and giving them the spec of what is it that you want, right? So theory of constraints keeps being the same. It's not the actual process of writing code, it's actually the process of defining what you want so that the AI can write the code. And I'm not saying that part is easy. That's actually the hardest part of building, and it's always been. But it's been a much slower process because of the coding bottleneck. But figuring out what to build is the most important thing these days.
Yeah. I heard you mention a term that I was going to mention, which is the theory of constraints, which is this idea in business that there's always a bottleneck somewhere, and it was made famous on the with an analogy of like the factory floor and understanding
Totally.
where is the biggest bottleneck on the factory floor and kind of optimizing everything around addressing that constraint. And when you do it, it's not that the constraints go away. It's just that now the biggest constraint becomes something else. And I totally agree with you. We're seeing this where I work, where the speed of our ability to develop code is definitely going up dramatically, but the overall the rate limiting factor, I'll say, is now become like the ability to identify and plan the right things to build. And then there's a whole bunch of stuff on the back end too, right? Of like
Yes.
change management, pushing stuff out, documentation.
So the constraints move to either side, and this happens in kind of manufacturing too. Once you solve a constraint, like you go to either end. And in software, on one end is planning, and on the other end is, okay, well, AI wrote 10,000 lines of code. Is that code good? Does that code do what I need to do? Will it work? Does it look good? Does it solve the customer problem? And then is it shippable?
Yep.
Big questions, right? And the interesting thing about the two constraints on either side is that you can think about them independently, which is what I think most people are doing right now, of like, oh, we need a layer of code review, we need a layer of security review, we need tools for like automated deployments. But our theory and what makes us unique here is that we think they're connected. Planning is connected to deployment. So if you know what you're building, you can evaluate how good the code is for that thing that you're building. And in the traditional sense of product management, we would always have like acceptance criteria. And the acceptance, one thing is to do a code review and say, hey, you can optimize this part of the code here and there. That's completely useless if it's building the wrong thing. So how we think about this is that a good planning will actually solve both constraints as the constraints move further upstream and downstream from code.
Yeah, that's a good point. And this is actually a perfect segue to just talk about BrainGrid, what it is, and the origin story behind it. So give anybody watching or listening a thumbnail sketch, and we'll get into much more detail as we dive into the product here very shortly. We're going to do some screen sharing and some live building together. But give us a thumbnail sketch of what BrainGrid is and what is the vision behind the product.
Yeah, so BrainGrid is an AI product planner. It helps you take a rough idea and turn it into a solid product plan made out of epics and specifications that an AI agent can build reliably. The problem today is that you start vibe coding something, you'll get a prototype, you'll get a version of something, but then it's really hard to really conceptualize the full thing, to know what's working, what's not working, what should I do next, how to sequence the different parts. And that's hard. That's always been hard. It's been hard with engineering teams as well. And that's what BrainGrid helps you do. It is a product for non-technical folks, non-technical founders, and it acts kind of like as your product partner. So you come with an idea that could be at different, say, levels of altitude, could be very abstract, could be very detailed, and it helps you come up with a plan that is buildable, that you can make progress, and that you can know if it's working or not. Kind of where we see this going, I touched on earlier that we went from auto-completing lines of code. Now with Claude Code, we're building kind of entire features. And if you follow that trajectory, the next thing we'll be doing is building entire products. And by products, I don't mean just the code. I mean everything around the code as well. And that's really where we're taking BrainGrid. BrainGrid is, our vision for BrainGrid is a product factory that helps you take an idea, build it, and then operate it and grow it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the vision. What would you say makes you guys different and better than, jumping into just like Claude on your desktop and saying, hey, I've got an idea for a feature or a product and help me build a roadmap or design this feature? what's the secret sauce that you guys bring to that process that you feel like makes BrainGrid,
Yeah.
uniquely positioned to help people with this challenge?
So what we've done is you take a tool like Claude Code, like Cursor, mostly serves like experienced developers. It's a tool that has like a million like knobs and things that you can do and ways that you can extend it. What we do in BrainGrid is that we've packaged all the best practices of planning and building into a very, very simple yet powerful workflow for non-technical users. So
Got it. Yep.
you don't need to kind of worry about setting up your local development. You don't need to do like a lot of things of tweaking all these coding agents. With BrainGrid, it'll just work. And I'll give you an example. The way that we write the specs ties into the skills that we give you to build things. So BrainGrid integrates with Cloud Code via CLI or MCP. But when you build a BrainGrid requirement, you use the BrainGrid build skill that fetches the requirement, builds everything, breaks it down into tasks, commits after every task. It has a kind of Ralph Wiggum type loop that it doesn't stop until all the acceptance criteria is verified. So essentially, this is what like professional engineers are doing on their own because they're good hackers, they're creative. But here we're bringing all these agentic development workflows that sit on top of the coding tools into a very simple experience for non-technical builders.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's jump in and take a look at it. And while you're getting that screen share pulled up, I will mention for others that have listened to previous episodes, you probably heard BrainGrid mentioned. I've had a couple of previous guests on that both use the product and really like it. So that was what prompted me to reach out to you. And I have looked at the product and dabbled with it. And I can see what you're talking about in terms of like just the overall, you didn't necessarily use this phrase specifically, but like the kind of UX or UI polish that you're putting on top of these processes, I think is a really nice form factor. The reality is that tools like Claude Code or even just using Claude on the desktop or any sort of chatbot is a very text heavy interface, right? And it's just a lot of dialogue back and forth. And having this kind of put into a user interface that allows you to maybe zoom out a little bit and see things a bit more visually. I know for me as a very visual person can be really helpful. So I look forward to jumping into this, and we're going to actually build a feature today live. And so I think that'll be a lot of fun. Tell us a little bit about what we're planning to build here, and then let's jump in. What's step number one?
Yeah. So what makes this special is and what makes the whole AI coding special is that folks with a lot of domain knowledge in all sorts of domains can now build software, right? With BrainGrid, they can build it the right way, right? And one of the hardest things building software and in general building products is that you have kind of like this general idea, right? Of like, hey, I have this problem, but I can't kind of like I can't really like pin it down, right? So I thought we would build, start with this idea, a CRM for podcasters to manage guests and track episodes, right?
And I love this idea. Selfishly, by the way, this is something I've actually been thinking about building. As I'm launching into this podcast journey myself, and so I think this will be a great project to jump into. And yeah, the first thing that strikes me there is that you can start, like you said, with just this very high level, very abstract idea. You don't have to have this sort of distilled down to like, I need this set of features and I need the UI to look like this. If you have that, great, I'm sure, right? You can start with that too, but like starting very high level, I think is a great place to jump into this.
And now, okay, it gives us right away, it gives us a name, PodVault. You can keep it if you want it. You can change it if you want. You can change it too, but you see here, first thing it starts doing research. So it kind of goes, across the web, sees what's out there. And the first thing that BrainGrid gives you is a brief. So it takes, 20 seconds to give you a brief of like, hey, let's start landing this idea, right? Gives you a one-liner, a purpose-built CRM for podcast hosts to manage guest relationships and track every episode from pitch to publish, right? So this is way better than what we gave it, right? But it's kind of like it's kind of spot on, right? Our value prop. So when you look at this from the very beginning, it's geared towards what is the value prop, what is the product. It's not telling you, hey, I'm gonna build a database, I'm gonna build these things, right? Which is what happens, like say if you go into like Claude Code plan mode, it'll start telling you, say, here's what I'm gonna build. It's like, well, I'm not sure what I'm gonna build yet, right? Just help me distill this a little bit, right? So
yeah, there's definitely like, I like that this is a more opinionated, workflow that's going to kind of steer you down that path. Like, because I have noticed with Claude Code that sometimes I have to, sort of rein it in almost and be like, okay, we're a little early in this process to be, planning this, or even just having to give it context about like who I am. I'm a director of product. I think strategically. I need to think about the product and the business problem and so forth. And like, you can do that, but you have to continually kind of remind it. And so again, I think this comes back to the idea of having a tool like this could be really helpful in terms of establishing a more consistent workflow in terms of how you think about developing and building new features.
And so we go here, okay, who is it for? The job to be done, right? And then the key functionality, right? So the guest CRM, episode tracker, notes and context, pipeline view, right? And then you're director of product, right?
Yeah.
One of the most important things that you do is
say no, or not now.
Like kind of like scope out what you're not going to do, right? Otherwise, you will never ship anything. But we're gonna push back on this a little bit, and say actually the email and calendar sync are pretty important. Right? Because like I don't want to be copy pasting from my email or my calendar. That's kind of pretty key. So we're gonna give that feedback to BrainGrid on the brief.
And actually, one thing I noticed there is a bit of a sidebar. But while this is thinking, it looked like you're using text to speech. Are you using something like a whisper flow? Do you have that built into the platform? I know more and more people doing that these days. I'm one of them. I find myself typing less and less.
I just have it on my computer.
Yeah.
So kind of like, and then it's like, okay, well, what do you mean by calendar and email sync? Do you want to send emails directly from the platform? It's like, I don't know. I feel like that kind of never works out well.
Right. I agree with you there.
It's like, let's just sync it. I want to continue using my email how I always do it, but I want the emails to be kind of
I want to have visibility to them in the platform and be able to see activity, but I'm not trying to build a new email client.
Exactly. So, and we've built a lot of like details on the product where like it gives you multiple choice questions, but then it's like you can edit them. So say
oh, that's cool. I like that.
Not Outlook for now.
I like that. Yeah, because I've had, Claude Code in the terminal does this kind of clarifying question thing. And it does give you an option at the bottom to sort of say, something else. Right. Tell Claude what to do or whatever. But a lot of times what I want to do is just slightly tweak one of the suggestions that they made. And I'm like, I wish I could just edit that one instead of having to, type it all over. And it's a small thing. But again, I think it comes back to this idea of a platform like this can put a little bit more of that UX polish on top of things, where when you're working with a tool directly like Claude Code or Cursor or something like that, you're maybe not going to get that. It's maybe a little bit more utilitarian.
Yeah. So here we said, okay, same thing, just sync the calendar. We don't want to build an entire calendar, right? And then primary user of the bot, solo podcast hosts managing everything themselves, right?
This, by the way, is really representative of one of the things, and I've said this on previous episodes as well, is that like I love when AI interviews me and asks me questions. Like when
Mm-hmm.
ChatGPT first came out, it was kind of like we all jumped in, and ChatGPT was kind of like this answer bot. Like you ask it questions, and you'll get answers back. And more, I'm finding myself deliberately crafting workflows similar to the one we're seeing
Mm-hmm.
here, where I'm turning those tables around, right? And AI is asking me questions because I continually find that it will ask me questions that I hadn't even considered, and that
Yeah.
prompts a lot of much clearer thinking about what it is that I'm trying to accomplish.
And I think you make a good point there. Like the clearer thinking is pretty key,
Yep.
right? As like code generation gets commoditized, build anything, right? And then, but like, is that anything going to be good, right?
That's right.
So
Yeah,
here we have,
when building products becomes easy, building the right products actually in a way
is
becomes harder.
it's way harder. Yeah. So here we've got our updated brief, right? With our key functionality, we've got the Gmail and calendar sync. It didn't include Outlook. Uh, so I think we're good to go. We tell it to create a project plan, right?
Got it. So I saw you clicked on a button there, and that was a project plan. So if we zoom out, what we've done now is we've gone through, like we've given it that original idea that was, again, super high level, super abstract. It came back with some ideas. We did a little bit of back and
Mm-hmm.
forth to clarify a couple of things, and now we're moving to the next step, which it looks like you guys in BrainGrid, we're
Yeah.
calling this a project plan. So talk to me about, as
Yeah.
it's
And
chewing on this, what are we like expecting to
so
see here?
one thing I should clarify here is that you can do this at the product level or you can do this at the feature level. So
Okay.
BrainGrid will connect to your repo, will analyze it, will understand everything. Uh, and then if you need to build a feature in an existing product, you can do it at the feature level and it'll do a similar process. It'll kind of help you tease out the feature that you're building.
Yep.
And it's a smart to know. So here we've got an epic that is pod vault that is essentially our brief, right? So think about it. It's like, hey, if you need to share this with somebody, what are we building? We're building this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and we've got 5 requirements: project foundation, get CRM, episode tracker, Gmail sync, and calendar sync. Um,
Got it. And just to clarify, the project plan that we're looking at here, where it's got an epic and now it's broken it down into the 5 requirements, that's the step we just did, right? When you clicked
yes,
on create project plan, this is the deliverable or the output that BrainGrid is giving us. So it's taken this nebulous idea that we started with now, and in just a few steps, we've clarified it and we've actually broken it down into like an epic with specific requirements.
correct. And these are empty, so we're going to click here on specify so that we can start writing them, right? So it'll read the entire project plan, it'll get all the context, and it'll start specifying. For each of these, it'll come back and ask us questions, right?
I love
Um,
it.
so
So it
what?
was able to take the initial information and had enough there to kind of break it down into requirements into buckets. But I actually really like that
So it's the
it didn't
skeleton.
try. Yeah, exactly. Like it made a skeleton, but it didn't try and go make a bunch of guesses and try to fill in all those details. It's
No,
now going to have us go through and think through each one of those
exactly.
a bit more clearly.
And when you look at this, how it broke this down. So you tell Cursor, you tell Cloud Code to break something down, and it's kind of funny because Cloud Code will break it down like an engineer would, right? And you probably have experience with this. An engineer, a developer will break this down of like requirement one, the data model.
Yeah,
Requirement two, the backend APIs. Requirement three, the services or whatever, right? And it's like, well, the thing with that, it's like it's architecturally sound, right? The thing with that is that you don't see user value until the very end. So
hmm,
this is very customer centric. It's very value driven. So we take like a steel thread approach to planning of like, okay, we'll do the project foundation, right? This is where we are here. Um, it's asking us about the landing page. It's asking us about the Google OAuth. And then it's designed that every single requirement provides user value. Kind of going back to kind of all the things that we've learned over the years with Agile, that everything has to provide user value, right? So shipping the data model, that doesn't help us, right? That doesn't help us kind of see if we're going the right direction, right?
Yeah, the
And
idea of getting something out there, and I've seen this illustrated as like, there's two drawings that are sort of presented side by side or one above the other, and the top one is they both end with a car, like a vehicle. The top one has it being built where there's like tires, and then there's the chassis, and then there's the
yeah,
beginning of the body and so forth until you get to a car, and then the bottom one is like a skateboard, a scooter,
totally.
a bike, and a car. And the point is that the bottom one is allowing you to deliver something that's useful on step one, where the top one doesn't give you something useful until the very end. And I think there are so many benefits to that, not just from like a user perspective of the user getting to experience the value more quickly, but also, and I think you alluded to this, the idea of like making contact with reality more quickly, and
Fundamental.
as a way of validating, like, are we even on the right path here? So I actually really like that BrainGrid sort of steers us down that path and keeps things a little bit more user focused instead of diving straight into like the technical details.
Yeah. And then, so here we've got our spec. It's now creating designs. Um, we've got our spec for just the foundation, right? With our acceptance criteria, right? So
Okay, so here we're inside that first requirement. So we've got
we're in,
project foundation and auth.
mhm. And what you'll see is that we've got pretty good heuristics to just choose a stack for you, right?
Yeah.
You shouldn't be choosing a stack. So here it gives us kind of a first pass at the landing page. Um, and but like you see, it's like the copy, the everything. It's kind of like very, very, because we have that brief, because we have, it's kind of very spot on. Podvault is the CRM for podcasters. Tracks every request from outreach to published episode with Gmail and Google Calendar connected,
Yeah, and
right?
it's still just so amazing to me too that, like, looking at this, like, I'm sure if I dove in and really started examining it, I'd be like, okay, we got to change this, we got to add this, whatever. Like, there's a lot of tweaking and sanding down of
Yeah.
rough edges that would need to happen. But the fact that, like, just in 15 minutes while we're talking and having a conversation and explaining things, we've gone from, hey, I want a CRM podcast app, to like some mock-ups, things broken down into technical requirements, and we're like well on our way to building
Yeah.
some sort of version one. And even as somebody who jumped into AI like immediately when ChatGPT came out, I'm still blown away every day. It just feels like
Yeah.
it's such a paradigm shift that we're going through right now. And I think some of us that are deep down the rabbit hole, sometimes have to step back and say, geez, look at what's happening here. It's incredible.
It is. It's here. There's something here I want to touch on. So first, it's like a lot of detail, like built for solo podcast hosts, right? It just knows this because we talked about it,
Yep.
right? And it gives us the skeleton on, okay, this is kind of the skeleton of what our app will look like, right? If you don't like something, you can change it. We'll change it in a minute. But the other thing we do is that we do an AI readiness assessment. So here we've got a 5 out of 5. So this is like ready to build. So you can see here it does a readiness assessment, and then it means that what you have here is ready to be built. So sometimes if you tackle like something like really complex of like, oh, I want to reverse engineer like the Postgres protocol to do XYZ or something, like you get a lower readiness assessment. It's like, this is still not ready. right? And it'll kind of guide you of like, hey, this is ready to build, this is not ready to build, right? And just that is going to kind of like get you, once you go into coding, get you like be much more successful.
Yeah, I really like that. I have spent a lot of time in Claude Code. Is kind of my main my daily driver in terms of agentic coding,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I do a lot in like plan mode, and just sometimes I'm not formally in plan mode, but I'm just, you know, tell Claude like, hey, don't start building. I just want to talk to you about this for a bit, and like
Yeah.
start going back and forth, and like I do find myself sometimes, you know, not infrequently, I'll say,
Mm-hmm.
wondering like, am I ready? Like, should I just start building this? Like, have I passed the point of diminishing returns here? You know, is it
Yeah.
time for me to just like fire Claude Code off and let it run? And that can be particularly tricky for me as somebody who is, you know, I'm technical. I work around software engineers. I can sort
Mm-hmm.
of speak the language and understand a little bit about what's going on in the code when I look at it. But I am not a coder. Like, I'm not an
Mm-hmm.
engineer, not a developer. So sometimes knowing when that point is that you need to just pull the trigger and move
Yeah.
forward can be really helpful. So that's a cool
Yeah.
concept. You're basing that off of. Can you give me some sense for like? You gave a very general example, but can you give me a little bit more on what is that
The
score based
readiness.
off of? Yeah. What are the kinds of things
Um,
that it's looking at?
yeah. So essentially, we use an adversarial approach. So the problem is, if in the same run you ask AI, hey, write the spec and make sure it's ready for implementation, it'll come back and say like, yes, it's ready. Right? It's AI, so it's like it has its own biases. So we take a multi-step approach. We try not to be like super duper kind of prescriptive, but just let the AI do its thing with an adversarial approach of like, what is this missing for to be implementation ready, right?
Got it.
And then it comes back, it's like, oh, actually, I need to update this, and that, right? And then we ask it, does the spec have, does the acceptance criteria have 100% coverage of what the spec covers? You should have 100% coverage, right? Uh,
That makes
are the
sense.
designs completely spec'd, right? And then
Got it.
kind of like we do this was a simple one. We could do another one where like you actually see implement the things. But I want to share one thing. So say we have some feedback on the designs. One of the trickiest things is always like connecting the design, the visual, and so it's like that button on the top right below the blah blah blah, and then it goes and like changes something else.
Painful. Yeah.
It's painful. So here we can just say, I don't like this. This just kind
Oh,
of
I
feels
love
a
that.
bit bad codey. So remove this border, and it'll send off the annotation, and it'll remove the border.
That is super cool. You are 100% right in my experience, and I know I've talked to a bunch of other people who, you know, this is not exactly going out on a limb here to say that like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of UI work of like I just need this button, you know, like, and I'm very particular. Like, I'm working on this personal context management kind of productivity style app that I'm using every day. And like,
Mm-hmm.
I want it to look good and I want the buttons to be perfectly aligned and it just feels better to use
Yeah,
the product. And sometimes, like, just the back and forth that I have to go through with the
brutal.
AI. No, move it over 2 more
Yeah,
pixels. You
it's
know,
like
like it can be really,
it's not centered. It's like it's not. It's just God.
yeah.
So one of the things I did was that I connected this to a repo. So uh, every project has a repo. Once it's connected, you kind of unlock the build, and then you can build with any agent. So you can build with Claude Code, with Cursor. We have a CLI you set up locally. So here's all the documentation on how to set up the CLI. But you essentially just go into Claude Code and type build rec1, and it goes. And it does what
Got
we
it.
call the BrainGrid loop, which is our own implementation of the Ralph Wiggum loop that essentially does not let Claude Code stop until all the acceptance criteria has been satisfied and it has provided satisfactory proof that it's satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to provide us proof that it's met that acceptance criteria.
You've mentioned the Ralph Wiggum loop a couple of times. I am notionally aware of this, but I'll be the first to admit that I haven't played with it, and I'm a little bit fuzzy. I think the general idea, and you might have alluded to this already, is that it's this process of kind of iterating through in the terminal. You're giving it like small, maybe chunks of work, in this case like a requirement, and some clear specifications about when that's complete, and it can like iterate through that and then move to the next one. And I think there was some relation to like keeping the context window sort of clean and controlled and so forth. I'm not sure how great I'm doing at describing that. Give our listeners, your sort of take on like what is this concept all about?
Think of a Ralph Wiggum loop as, so when you type something into Claude Code or any of these, it'll kind of go until it goes and then it stops, right? When it thinks it's done, or when it's like, hey, this is kind of my stopping point, right? What a loop does is that it gives the agent, you can think of it as an optimization function. So it can iterate on it and go and go and go and not stop when it thinks it needs to stop, but stop when a certain criteria is met. So this is ideal for what we do for the acceptance criteria. So you give it this requirement, right? And you let it run, right? Claude Code can work for hours if you want to, right? And then you go have lunch, come back, and it's like, what does this thing build? Is it ready? Is it not ready? What are we missing? I have no idea, right? And then you kind of have to start kind of peeling back and testing and like doing all this painful process, right? Of like, what was it built? Does it work? Does it not work? I don't know. It's like, sure, it coded while I was having lunch, but now after lunch, I'm stuck kind of like figuring out what it did, right? What the loop does is that it takes that acceptance criteria and it forces it to not stop until it's met. So one part is, okay, this is the specification, right? And like, these are the user stories, the functional requirements, the landing page, everything, technical requirements. But then the other thing is like, are these met? So when I review a spec, most of my time is spent looking at the acceptance criteria. It's the exit criteria. So how the loop happens is that it has a hook on stop. So when Claude Code stops, it executes that loop, it queries the criteria, and it says, like, all the criteria met? No. Go back.
Going. Yeah.
And keep going.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I can see why the comment you made there of like where you're spending the bulk of your time when you're looking at these requirements is on the acceptance criteria. And it reminds me a little bit of like test-driven development, where you're like, hey, at the end of the day, like there's probably a million different ways that we could go solve this problem. What I care about is that we can check these 5 boxes when this feature is built. And
I remember during my time at Twilio, I spent almost a decade in product at Twilio. We would work with these kind of third parties that would do testing for us. And like they would take that acceptance criteria and build all the test cases and do all these things. But like the acceptance criteria is kind of like, as a PM, is like that's your sign off. Does it meet the acceptance criteria? Yeah. Right. So here, let's do just another one.
So as you jump into this next one, you go ahead and get that started. But let's zoom out a little bit. So again, we started with this really high level abstract idea. We did a little bit of back and forth with the agent. It broke it down into an epic and some requirements. Then we went into one of those requirements. We fleshed that out. And now we haven't done it, but you alluded to the fact that like what we could be doing right now if we were actually building this in practice is that first requirement that we've spec'd out. Like you could jump over into Claude Code or Cursor or whatever environment that you're working in, and then using that BrainGrid integration, you can say build rec1. It's tied to the repo, so it knows what rec1 is. It can go grab it, and it can start working. And while it's working on that one, you can jump into requirement 2 and start fleshing that out. So now not only has BrainGrid really become a tool for me to like drive clarity into these requirements and plan them out in more detail, but it actually is becoming kind of an agent orchestration layer where I can get multiple things moving in parallel and have this interface to keep things really nicely organized.
Totally. And then let's just kind of choose a couple here so we can continue.
Yeah.
It is totally an agent orchestration layer. And one of the things that we are working on is bringing kind of an instance of Claude Code into BrainGrid to run it just from the same UI, so that like a lot of what we hear from users is, let me see. A lot of what I hear from users is that setting up the development environment is a pain. It's fine if you're a professional developer. This is a really good question, by the way. So, how should guests relate to episodes? One guest can appear on many episodes. Each guest can appear on exactly one episode. Many guests per episode and many episodes per
many to
guest.
Many. Yeah.
Right? And it's like, God, get this wrong from the beginning. Like your app's going to be screwed.
Yeah, you got
right?
big problems there for sure.
Yeah,
and it's a way of like getting to one of those technical requirements, but in a way that's intuitive for somebody who's not necessarily thinking about data structures and database details, right? Like a many-to-many relationship is an intuitive concept for anybody who spent any time at all developing data structures and databases. But for somebody who's totally non-technical, many-to-many,
put it in
what
their
does that mean?
terms.
Like I have no idea what that means. But oh yeah, well of course. Like I might want to have Nico on an episode in the future, or I might want to have, more than Nico and his co-founder on an episode, right? So that's like intuitive way to think about it. So it's like taking those technical details and translating them into language that's more intuitive for, typical people that are going to be in here using this.
Yeah. So I was saying that a lot of what we hear is when you get to that build stage, it's like, I haven't set up Claude Code. I haven't set up Cursor. It's like, help me. Right? People want something more sophisticated than what like a tool like Lovable or like just a pure landing page builder or like a pure vibe coding tool gives them, something that they can structure the product. But making the jump all the way to Claude Code is too much. It's like setting up your local environment is a royal pain.
Yeah.
Even like developers kind of like battle with it quite a bit.
Yeah, I can see that. Like I have, friends and colleagues reach out periodically because they know I'm like, way into this stuff, and they'll say like, oh, hey, get me started. Like show me, how you're doing this thing. And you can kind of see the eyes gloss over a little bit when you open up Cursor
a terminal
especially. And so I can see what you're saying there. And I think some sort of tool in between like a Lovable and a Claude Code, it does feel like that there might be like a gap in the market there.
Yeah. So here we're kind of chipping away, working through our second one. Now we have a guest CRM. As I said, it's a unit of value we're delivering here. It's like build the guest management core of PodVault, right? Searchable guest list, individual profile pages, 5-stage outreach pipeline, and per guest reform nodes, right? And then it gives you kind of like the whole spec.
And I see it's while you're reviewing this, it's also creating the design as well.
It's working on the designs. Yep.
I love that. I love the focus on the design. That is definitely something that in my workflow that I'm using today is a big point of friction, kind of getting that UI right. It feels like a total black box to me, right? I'm planning, I'm thinking through features and blah, blah, blah. But when I hit go, I kind of have no idea what it's going to come back with in terms of the UI. So I love that this is just sort of baked into the workflow.
And the thing is, you might kind of want to tweak the design, you might want to make changes and everything, right? Like, and that's fine. But the UI and the designs really help you conceptualize it,
Mm-hmm.
really help you kind of land the UX. We've done a lot of work building the front end and the UX skills behind this. So this is not just kind of plain Sonnet behind this or plain Opus. Um, it's like all our kind of UX and front end skills built into this.
And there
And
it
like
is.
here's like yeah, it is like you can kind of visualize this. Um,
That visualization piece too is so like really great point because yeah, it may not get the UI perfect, and there's definitely going to be things as you learn and develop the product, you're obviously going to want to continue evolving the UI, but the point is not to nail it perfectly the first time. The point is to give you something visual that you can look. I'm an extremely visual person,
mhm.
and so when I see that UI for the first time, lots of things are going to click for me that would take 10 times longer for me to have that aha moment if I'm just
Yeah.
doing it in the form of text.
And we're not looking to kind of build Figma in here or anything like that, right? It's just like this is you can think of it as a little bit of a higher fidelity than just a wireframe, right? We thought
Yep.
about doing wireframes of just like pure wireframes, but it's like, no, we can actually do kind of nicer designs and bring the idea to life, right? But we've been kind of working on this for just under an hour, and like we now have a pretty good idea of what the system would look like, and then we have kind of our path to ship our V1,
Yep.
right? And like things that are potentially tricky of like the Gmail sync, the calendar sync, right? Now start feeling like less intimidating, right? Once we have our foundation, once we have our kind of our core kind of CRM, uh, tackling the Gmail sync on top of that feels way less intimidating than tackling it in one
100%.
go.
Yeah, you start to build some momentum, and that's a real thing. So yeah, we're going to bump up against time a little bit. I want to talk about what is the process. We don't have to jump in and like look at it in detail, but like talk to me now about like, okay, you've got these requirements, you've gone through, you've refined some, you've fired off your agent, it's building,
Mm-hmm.
you're refining others. Let's say hypothetically that first request, let's say we had gone and built it. What is like? How does BrainGrid now interact with the process once I've jumped over into Claude Code and I've built that feature? Do I get some sort of notification in BrainGrid that it's done? Is there any sort of review process? Talk to me about like
Yeah.
where it fits in that stage of the
So it's
development
it's
pipeline.
pretty neat because it does kind of what everybody should be doing, which is kind of creating a feature branch, putting everything in a feature branch. Uh, all that stuff, it does it for you. So once you build Rec 1, you'll have a feature branch that you can review, right? The requirement will be in review. And then if it's good to go, like you can close it, it'll mark it as completed, and you can continue with Rec 2. It'll create a feature branch for that. Uh, if you kind of care about it, great. If you don't care about it, like you don't even need to know that exists. All kind of that kind of best practices Git workflow happens under the hood.
Got
Um,
it. And does BrainGrid today or in the future, do you plan to like? Does it get involved in the process of like? So you've tested it. Maybe you want to create a pull request, merge it into main. Like, is it involved at that level of the Git
Not
process?
today.
Got it.
The next version of BrainGrid that we're working on, you will be able to build on the platform. It's still powered by Claude Code, so it's the same experience, but it's on like completely on Rails. And then you'll be able to hit publish, and that essentially takes that PR, runs the tests, merges it, and it gives you a URL where you have your pod vault working.
Got it.
So
Yeah.
we're kind of like taking every step of like what are the things that you need to build a product, knocking kind of barrier by barrier, um, and yeah, so very shortly you'll be able to just kind of hit publish, get a URL, get a working app, and
Very cool.
it will be deployed,
Yeah,
managed for you.
that's
And then
great because I do think, especially if you're targeting a more non-technical audience, like concepts around GitHub, feature
complicated.
branches, pull requests, all that. It's like this whole like I'm still like to this day, I don't quite grasp all of it, right? I get the basics, but I think sort of
Uh,
giving people a layer over that takes some of that
totally,
complexity away. And then there's
totally.
the whole like DevOps, deployment, hosting, all that
Logs.
stuff is like crazy complicated. And
Yeah.
so I think the
How
more
we envision this is that you will have so that we will evolve from being kind of a tool to being a team. So think about it in you have a product manager that helps you plan, you have a developer that helps you build, and you have a go-to-market engineer that helps you go to market, right? Can generate content, can do outreach, can do like all these things, right? So you as a solo founder, you come with an idea and you get a team of agents that are working on your behalf on the different fronts. And those teams and those agents can talk to each other, can coordinate. Um, and right now what I showed you was the planning. We're building the builder. And next is going to be, okay, well, we have this pod vault, right? You use it, but how can we help you grow that product? There's tons of podcasters in all different industries and verticals and everything that could use a tool like that.
right, right. And I know, like, I've talked to a couple of my friends who I mentioned earlier, who a couple have been on the show and used BrainGrid, and they're already using it for stuff like that. Like they were really singing the product's praises in terms of its ability not just to plan and execute features, but I know people who are actually using it for help center content for their software.
Mm-hmm.
To help develop like content for their blog around the software, et
Totally.
cetera. So there's this whole kind of other area of features that we didn't even really talk about, or use cases,
Yeah.
I should say, where you can have like these agentic workflows built in to help you generate things like help center content, change logs,
Yeah.
emails, all sorts of stuff. So it's pretty interesting to
Yeah.
think about.
So that's that's I think where the world's heading of like just teams of agent that are highly curated to a particular uh, kind of ICP and that are tied with a workflow that works for what that ICP needs to accomplish.
And I think it comes full circle to what we were talking about earlier, how the theory of constraints, and if the coding problem is solved, it pushes things out to both sides of it, right? So there's the whole
Totally.
planning stage, which is primarily where we focus, but there's also this kind of whole go-to-market product support side of things where AI can be incredibly helpful as well.
Absolutely.
So, man, this has been a really fun conversation. I'd love to hear maybe just quickly, like, how are you guys using AI? We've talked about AI in the product. I would imagine you're also a very AI centric company in terms of how you're
Totally.
using AI to run BrainGrid. Can you give me a high level overview of how you guys are thinking about AI in terms of using it to run your business?
Yeah. So we obviously build BrainGrid with BrainGrid. Um, and one of the things that we do is that as a team, we do these just planning sessions and we go through these spec processes as a team. We answer the questions together and we make sure that kind of like we're on the same page of what we're building. And we end up after an hour with 10, 20 specs. We each take them and then we go build them and babysit them and get them to production. And that's a lot of um, how we use BrainGrid. Personally, I tend to be in kind of a planning mode or a building mode. So I kind of churn through uh, four, five, six specs of like different things that we need to do, and then we discuss them with the team, and then we kind of like each take some to build. Overall, kind of what we do with the platform and what we do um, with everything is that if we need something, it's like what is the skill that we need to build to do this? So we build skills for everything. So and you see that in the product. Okay, refine. refined requirement, front-end designer, UX designer. Like we build skills for everything. And we do that internally too. Customer communications. Well, we need to send an email that talks about a price change or something like that. It's like, let's
Build a skill.
Do customer communications. And then the next level that we're doing is, okay, we'll build agents, right? So that's really kind of what's guiding this vision of building a team of agents and having BrainGrid be a team of agents for solo founders.
Very cool. And the thing you said there that resonates the most is that you guys use BrainGrid to build BrainGrid. And as a product guy, I am such a huge fan of using products that when I know the team building the product uses the product themselves, that's a big +1 in terms of my evaluation of using the software, because there's simply no replacement for eating your own dog food, right? And like being in the software, using it yourself day to day. That's like how you're going to find all those little rough edges and paper cuts that users are getting in the software. And when you know the team building it is also using it, you can kind of rest assured that a lot of those little annoyances, not just the big stuff and the overall direction of the platform, but those little things that really define the day-to-day experience are also going to be polished.
And there's something that AI won't solve. And I think it's one of the competitive advantages that startups and small companies and small teams have, is that they care. They care about their product. They care about their customers. They care about the experience. They care about the details. Like that, there's nothing that changes that. That attention to detail, that dedication, that's like, if I see something, I'm gonna fix it. I'm gonna get this working right. Teams that care are ultimately the teams that are gonna thrive in the era of AI. AI is not gonna build stuff for you, and it's not gonna care for you. You're the one that needs to care.
Yeah.
And you just need to point the AI in the right direction so that it builds what it needs to build.
Man, I love that, and I think that is a perfect place to wrap up this conversation. So, Nico, thank you so much for taking some time to join me on the show. It was really fun to dive in and learn about the product and kind of see it in practice. If there's anybody watching or listening that wants to connect with you, learn more about the product, hear more about what you're up to, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can check out braingrid.ai and then connect on LinkedIn or X. And I'm Acosta with double S, ACOSSTA on X, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on both platforms.
Awesome. All right, Nico, thanks again for joining me. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Jason.
All right. Take care.
Bye.